chickens currently. I just got done vaccinating the sheep. So sheep vaccinations, the one that we give them specifically is called CDT. And for those of you that have goats, you probably give it to your goats too. It stands for Clostridium types C and D. So that's where CD comes from. And then T stands for tetanus. So just like we get tetanus shots, sheep also have to get tetanus shots, but theirs are boosted on a yearly basis. So about a month ago, I vaccinated the lambs for it initially, and then 3 to 4 weeks later, you have to booster it. So that's what we did today. It's between 3 and 4 weeks, actually. It would be 4 weeks on Sunday. And we're planning on turning the sheep out by this weekend. So I did also treat the ram with Corid. So he's got 3 treatments left. So what Clostridium is, it can be caused by different types of bacteria. I'm not going to go super in depth with this, but basically it can cause enterotoxemia, which means that the animals can't properly digest things, and that's how you end up with bloat. So it's not like they still can get certain types of bloat. They're just not as prone to like what happens with bottle babies more commonly. So that's just like a preventative. And again, with lambs, you give them their first initial vaccine, which for mine was almost a month ago. And then you give them the booster 3 to 4 weeks later. The sheep have already gotten their full round. So in order for an animal to be completely vaccinated against something, and if it requires a booster, you have to give them that booster 3 to 4 weeks later, and then it's yearly after that. So I know people tend to get lazy with it, but you want to have, if you're going to vaccinate and you're going to spend the money to do it, then you should probably do it correctly. And I know that this might apply to some of you if you ever do decide to buy animals, and it's the same way with dogs. Like if you adopt a dog and it doesn't have a vaccine history, which usually if you go through the SPCA, they give those rounds of vaccines beforehand, so you have at least some sort of vaccine history. But if you buy animals and they don't have a vaccine history, say you buy them from the auction, which depending on the auction I don't necessarily recommend, but if you buy them and they don't have a history like that, then it's always best to err on the side of caution and vaccinate them with a full round anyway. Believe it or not, chickens do actually eat grass, but they are not grass fed. So sometimes you'll see mislabeling occurring, and people will claim that eggs come from grass fed or vegetarian, and they actually prefer to eat bugs, which obviously if something eats bugs, it's not a vegetarian. So by making chickens more like vegetarian fed, as these people claim, it's actually more unhealthy for the chickens. They're actually omnivores. So mine don't eat mice, but I know that some people say that theirs do eat mice and rodents and frogs. I've never seen mine do it. So there's my daily photo video of the Splash Lace Red Wyandotte. He's not super friendly, so he doesn't normally let me walk up to him. But he's so pretty. This guy's kind of standing guard, so that's another thing about roosters and why I like to have them. Obviously because the eggs are fertile, but because they kind of protect the hens. So when things like fly overhead or, like a predator comes into the yard, a good rooster will sound the alarm, and normally they make like this obnoxiously loud squawking sound, and all the chickens will run for cover, which doesn't happen too often, but sometimes we do have like random birds like turkey vultures and stuff flying overhead. Turkey vultures won't kill chickens, but we also have hawks and bald eagles that frequent the swamp behind our house. So it is a concern, which is why our chicks are in a pen. Yep, he's just showing dominance. One thing I did notice on these chicks down here, hatched over February break, so February 22nd or so, their combs are starting to turn red, and they're not roosters. So a sign of pullets, a pullet is a young female chicken, a sign of pullets coming to maturity is their combs get a little bit larger, and they also turn reddish in color. So if you see that happening, usually within a couple of weeks they'll start laying. So these guys are around 12 weeks old, and normally it happens around 16 to 20 weeks. The white leghorns, the white ones on the other side over there, those are both white leghorns. And I found that the white leghorns start laying sooner than most other breeds, which is also why they're a very popular production chicken. I also had a lot of people randomly asking me or sending me pictures. I've had some kids do this, some students send me text messages and ask, you know, is my chicken a rooster? And this one right here is a perfect example. So I bought these, some of them were straight run, which means that they're both males and females. They are not sexed, so you could get either males and females. So most of them I got hens specifically, but there were like 15 that I got straight run. So this is one of my straight run roosters, and if you look towards his tail, I will draw a picture on here so that you can see, but his tail has this fan. So we call those saddle feathers. So the feathers kind of get to a point and turn downward. We have this pen reinforced with extra wire so that we didn't have foxes taking these chickens. So this guy right here up towards the top of his neck, and I'll draw an arrow on that again, but you'll see how his feathers get really narrow, and then they also go to a point, and that's called the hackles. So right where the neck part is. And these are hens, and you might not be able to tell unless you like were super up close to them. This one's kind of close. But the barring makes it hard to see, but the feathers really don't come to a point. They're more dull in shape, and that's what signifies the hen. But you can see where the tail is, how they do not fall. Those feathers don't fall on either side of the tail. They really just kind of like blend together really well, whereas roosters have more of a defined point to it. So another thing that we did today, we've been planning to do this, but when you have animals, you do something called rotational grazing if you have enough pasture. So we do have a significant amount of acreage, and the outside perimeter of our fencing, I don't know if you can see it, there's posts there, but that's high tensile fencing, and it's 5 or 6 strand with every other wire hot. So that's what keeps our sheep and cows in. And up until today, the things that we're dividing it were actually temporary. So they were T-posts, like metal T-posts with straight wire ran to them, and they weren't necessarily reliable, and the sheep didn't respect them. So we did hire the person that put in our perimeter fencing to put in our dividing. So this is an example here. You can see the beautiful sunset, but the fencing right here goes all the way to the road, and so you'll be seeing a lot more of this pasture. We have some geese over here. Yeah, so some people like to make jokes and say that we're geese farmers because we have wild Canadian geese inhabiting our fields when our cows and sheep are not, and sometimes it's even when they are inhabiting it. But we do have some wetlands. We own some wetlands, like, I don't know, it's about 20 or 30 acres of swamp and wetlands, which butts right up to a railroad track. So that's kind of, you know, like a scenic, picturesque thing. So once the animals come out here, we will end up, well, I will be checking on them probably on a daily basis, and then like every other day, just to make sure that they're all healthy and doing well out here. I'll talk tomorrow a little bit about what concerns can be when you let animals out to pasture that haven't been on green pasture in a while. And you can see, like, obviously there's tire tracks here from where they drove, but the pasture is growing pretty well. And it is getting really cold out here, but this is an example of what it looks like, at least in the lower spot near the wetlands. But once the animals come out here, it's electrified. So anywhere you see these insulators, because if you know anything about electricity and fencing, you have to have insulators in order for the electrical current to successfully go through it. So we do have a very strong fencer to keep the animals in. The sheep forced us to get one when we first bought this place and when we moved in here, because they didn't respect the fencer that we had. So this should not be an issue with keeping the animals in. And then of course you have, again, I'm not going to go super far into electrical theory or anything, but you have a carrying wire that is insulated to go to the other side when we have these panels. We do need access to this area through this panel also. So it actually has a wetland easement on it, dirt, like through part of it. So it's like from where this fence line is and all the way over to the railroad tracks. It doesn't mean that we can't use it, but it means that there are restrictions to the use of it, which isn't the worst thing in the world, because it does kind of preserve an area for wildlife to kind of thrive here. And obviously the wetlands isn't usable for anything agricultural as far as we are concerned. We don't have a use for it. And there are some beavers that have built like dens out there. We don't trap them or anything, but So here's kind of a funny thing. I think it was last summer, 2 summers ago, we hire a guy to do our hay because we don't have all of the equipment yet. So we hire somebody to cut, rake, bale, and wrap our hay. And when we were gone to Camp Oswegatchie, this was an escaped bale. So you can see that this is a pretty steep incline here, all the way up to 242. And I guess he bailed it, and I don't know, he thought that he was paying attention to the incline and making sure that the bale wouldn't roll down it, but apparently it still escaped. So we will forever have a wild bale sitting kind of in a swamp. We also had one of the wettest spots of our pasture area high tensiled fence as well. So that was also with T-posts, and once the cows got moved out here from central New York, we were always concerned about them getting out. So this kind of alleviates that. So now literally the entire perimeter fencing is high tensiled and electrified, and unless like something catastrophic happens, you know, it's really reliable fencing. So another thing that I'm going to talk about quickly is that, especially when you're on a busy road like this, you want to have something reliable. So up at the top of this pasture, there's New York Route 242, which is a state road, and just like where I had my cows when I was growing up, it is kind of a hazard to have animals bordering a state road. Basically, the biggest problem when you have animals this close is if they do get out and an accident happens and somebody gets hurt, that becomes a liability on the farmer, of course, because their animals should have been properly restrained or kept in, and if that fails, then that could literally cost you the farm.